you ever roll out your mat hoping to feel a sense of calm, but as an overthinker with a chaotic schedule, you just end up stressing about your to-do list and feeling like you've wasted the time that you never really had? I've been there and I couldn't sit still either, and I never would have progressed past the basics, let alone found a consistent home practice and mastered the second series, if I just listened to the generic advice out there about letting go and surrendering. So in this video, I'm going to show you step by step how to overcome the sense of overthinking using Ashtanga Vinyasa, which has a powerful built-in method of temporarily suspending the mind, helping you find this genuine sense of focus and calm faster and quicker than you've ever thought possible. So stick with me to the end, because I'm going to share with you the 5-step process that I use to overcome overthinking that you can use starting today. First, let's talk about pratyahara. Pratyahara means sense withdrawal. It's the 5th limb in the 8 limbs of Ashtanga Yoga and represents sense control. We perceive the world around us through our 5 senses: taste, touch, smell, hearing, and sight. And through gaining control of this interface through which we experience the world, we can then turn the attention inward and not be so caught up in what's happening outside of us. In most Western classes today, you'll notice we've got mirrors, we've got loud music, lots of people in a room, and it's hard to do this process of pratyahara. It's hard to turn inwards and notice what's happening on the inside. And this is why within my Yoga Mastery program, I only teach a home practice where you just roll out your mat. It's just you, there's no mirrors, and you kind of interiorizing the practice. According to the Upanishads, these ancient yogic texts, the senses deliver a constant fuel to the mind through the sense objects. Think of it like this candle flame. Beautiful, right? It has oxygen all around it, and that's what keeps it continuously burning. Now imagine if I brought a glass over it and just placed it over this candle flame. Slowly you'll notice that the fuel gets cut off and the candle flame over time dies out. Now this is exactly what happens with our minds. The world provides us a constant fuel all the time through our senses, whether it's our phone going off or a toddler in the other room. And what then happens is that our mind is constantly overstimulated, and the mind is awake and alert and always burning, always taking in more, always trying to do something. But when we temporarily suspend the mind, when we stop feeding the mind this fuel, it then goes into a place of suspension and quietness. But when we keep feeding the mind through this stimulation, it develops desires and worries, and this is the source of our suffering. What's interesting is that the mind perceives that there's always a lack, and it's programmed this way because then it reaches out into the world to have its basic needs met. But beyond just meeting those basic needs, there's a sense of perceived lack, and it reaches out into the world, and the mind tells us that through a constant supply of stimulation, it will then feel a sense of fulfillment. So we scroll on our phones, looking at other people's bags and shoes and vacations, and because there's this sense of lacuna, there's a sense of a lack inside of us, we always reaching outwards to feel a sense of completeness. But yoga says something completely different. What it says is that we are already in a state of complete bliss. It's only because of our mental chatter that we can't quite perceive this pristine, natural state of complete, pure bliss. Now that we understand the concept of pratyahara and how the mind is constantly reaching outside of itself to satisfy its desires, we now take a look at how Ashtanga Yoga specifically helps us concentrate the mind and almost serve as an antidote to this constant state of overstimulation. Firstly, it helps us really work with our auditory focus. When we step on the mat, the first thing that our teacher usually teaches us is how to practice Ujjayi Pranayama. And Ujjayi Pranayama is one thing that your mind can stay connected to through the rest of the practice, and that Ujjayi breath then becomes your anchor, your auditory focus. So instead of listening to your kids arguing outside or like just traffic on the road, you tune into the sound of your own breath. The second thing that the Ashtanga Vinyasa system has built in is the visual focus. So instead of looking around the room and allowing your eyes to wander, we're given these 9 specific gazing points to keep our visual focus anchored. Now there's 2 approaches. We can either just cut off these visual senses and our auditory senses and stay in like a sensory deprivation tank, or we can do an open-eyed meditation where we're engaged with the world, but we're able to almost tune into the thing that we want to focus on. In our day-to-day lives, it's almost impossible to just cut ourselves off and go meditate in a cave because we need our eyes and our ears to navigate through that overcrowded subway and know which train to take. But if we just used Ashtanga Vinyasa as a method to train the visual focus and train the auditory focus, something remarkable happens. We can use those skills that we've trained on the mat, off the mat as well. When your mind is constantly receiving fuel from the external world, it's kind of like an unimaginative drone. It's just capturing everything as fast as possible, and that's why you could be looking straight at the train schedule and the smell of coffee and that toddler crying and all the distractions in your environment could make you miss a train. And it's not your fault, it's just that your system is overloaded. And the longer that we spend in these states of sensory overload, the more we suffer. I want you guys to take a moment today to just reflect on this. The more time we spend in this state of just feeling like we're stimulated, the more we have this underlying sense of unsatisfactoriness. Maybe you've been scrolling on your phone for 30 minutes and all you're seeing is someone trying to sell you something constantly, and it's planting these desires, these things that we don't have, that we don't even need maybe inside our brains. And you wouldn't want so many things unless the mind has this sense of perceived lack. And when we understand this, we can then gain some more control over our own minds, and limiting sensory input is a good starting point to have. But is limiting sensory input enough? Because if we limit sensory input, something interesting happens. When all the external noises quieten down, the internal stuff, the stuff from your subconscious mind or your chitta starts to bubble up to the surface. Think of your chitta like a large riverbed. It's got this storehouse of all the memories, all your past impressions, and when the mind isn't occupied with just external stimuli, then stuff from this riverbed starts to show up as waves on the surface. And the mind, the sensory motor mind, then has more stuff to deal with, and it can either identify and say, okay, this is something that I need to deal with, and then pass on to the intellect to categorize and reason and do something with it, or you can just dismiss it and just continue doing what you're doing. And often we don't even give ourselves the chance to stay so quiet that stuff from underneath starts to bubble up. So if you're practicing and you notice that your mind is wandering, it's completely normal. It's almost a natural process of cutting off the external stimuli and noticing what's already here inside. Laboratory experiments have even shown that when they put people in these kinds of sensory deprivation tanks, it then becomes like a powerful tool for therapy, because stuff from the past, like stuff that they've buried down, starts to come up to the surface. And then through psychotherapy, through talk therapy, people then heal from these experiences. Here's the exact 5-step process on how to stop overthinking every time you step on the mat. First, limit sensory input. So find a relatively quiet space, even if it's just a tiny little corner where you can roll out your mat and be undisturbed. Next, perform all the prescribed actions. So engage your bandhas, perform your ujjayi breath, look at your postural alignment, and really focus inwards in the posture. Next, learn how to tune out your senses. So when you're focusing on maintaining your Uddiyana Bandha and listening to the sound of your breath and correcting yourself in triangle pose, the mind doesn't have any more bandwidth to think about that email or your dinner plans. And this is exactly what we want to do. We want to limit the scope for the mind and give it something to work with so that it doesn't get distracted and go into the next thing. When you do this, memory traces will surface. So it's completely natural for you to think of something else when you're in triangle pose, but don't try and suppress it. Just remember that this is a natural, normal part of the process, and instead, what I want you to do is acknowledge it and gently step around it. Each time you notice your mind is just wandering off, gently, slowly guide it back to the present moment, on the breath, on the bandhas, on the drishti, and slowly you'll start to not just strengthen your body and gain flexibility, but you'll also strengthen your mental muscles. And this is really what we want, to stop overthinking and carry that over to the rest of our lives. Slowly, with regular practice, your mind will learn how to tune out the excess, and you'll have access to parts of your mind that you didn't even know existed. And just remember that when this external world isn't intruding on you so much, you'll gain a sense of intimacy, a sense of awareness with your internal world, and you'll see that overthinking isn't a flaw. It's just that you haven't been taught how to train your mind to focus your senses and work with this. And when we live in such an overstimulated world, it's the hardest thing ever to work against this and actually go within. So there you have it, the exact 5-step process on how you can find that elusive stillness that you've been searching for through an open-eyed practice where you're not cutting yourself off and you're actually engaged with the world. And I've seen this working for hundreds of students who were completely convinced that they were too busy, they didn't have enough time for yoga, and when they started a consistent Ashtanga practice, something inside shifted. And if you found these insights valuable, don't forget to check out this video where I teach you about the internal instruments and how you can understand these internal instruments and apply this 5-step process to actually not be as distracted on the mat. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. Until next time, just remember, your overthinking mind isn't broken, it just needs the right training. Namaste.